private sector. But I think what we will also get is the opportunity to look at businesses in the water and sanitation space, which will mean there will be for-profit models which people can run, including women can run. So how are we doing with Mr. Nara, folks?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, he's facing some technical issues. He's joining in a minute. So.
Okay. Natasha, would you like to come in and just chip in on some of what we're doing?
Yeah, I think, Naina, as you rightly said, it's really important that we look at all that we do, not just for water and sanitation, I guess for every sector through the women's lens, because historically, traditionally, we all know that that's the sector that's always been, weaker, if I can put it that, or more vulnerable with regards to, the kind of access they have had. Now, in water and sanitation particularly, what has happened is that, women have historically always been used to using very primitive methods in terms of either, sanitation, or water has always been their primary role. So, gathering water from the minute they wake up in the morning, large distances that they have to cover, to ensuring the cleanliness of their children. I think what COVID really brought out to us was that if a woman is not allowed to be kept clean and healthy, then everything around her suffers, which is children, the male population, everything, because she is the primary caregiver across the board. So I think whatever we discuss today is going to be truly very, very important.
Thanks, Natasha. Mr. Ravi Kumar Nara has joined.
Yeah.
Sir, could you start your camera and unmute yourself? Yeah, I think so. His camera is on. Yes, sir, we can see you. I think you have to just unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hello, yes, sir. You're right.
Yeah.
Welcome, sir.
Yeah, good evening, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Nara. You've been introduced. We've talked about the criticality of women in the water and sanitation space, and delighted to have you here with us. So I'm just going to throw you the first question, which I really look forward to your response, given the things that you have achieved and where you work. So in this scenario today, what do you see as the enablers and the barriers to women who are part of the sanitation economy? Essentially, with SBM2 and the recently launched schemes like the Prime Minister Garib Kalyan Yojana and Make in India, what kind of opportunities and risks do you see for the informal sector, for the MSME sector in sanitation? So specifically women, but also MSME and the informal sector, because women could well participate through the informal sector and MSME opportunities as well. And of course, while you discuss this, to hear what role you as the leader in DICCI play.
Yeah. See, as far as the role of the woman is concerned as an entrepreneur in the sanitation or the waste management, we see very less participation. But as far as the work is concerned, more than 50% of the work is being done by the female workers. So now, as a decade, what we are planning is that the people who are engaged as a laborers, so we are trying to convert them as a contractors. So for that, there are a lot of policy barriers are there. Because if one wants to become an entrepreneur, just simply cannot become, because every activity in the urban local bodies or the municipal corporations or the some other entities which are engaged in the sanitation work, they have to follow the Government of India rules regarding the tenders and the qualification criteria, so many technical criteria, all those things are. So which these people will not meet at all. For that reason, though the open tenders are being invited by the authorities, and none of them are able to participate to become a contractor or the entrepreneur from MSME sector into uh, and become the entrepreneur. So we have extensively studied as a decade what are the barriers and what are the challenges being faced by the especially women entrepreneurs in this line of activity. We have made it a policy document and we have submitted to various municipalities and the Ministry of Housing and various state government municipal administration departments. We have submitted to make certain relaxations those women who wants to become an entrepreneur in the sanitation line of activity. And it is in the pipeline. Some of them are responding positively because unless we get some policy support system from the government, it is very difficult for the woman to become an entrepreneur in the sanitation. Hello?
You're on mute. You're on mute, Naina.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Just given what you've said and identified that there are technical parameters which women in particular would have an issue in terms of qualifying or indeed availing of some of the government programs. While you do the work that you're attempting to do at Dickey, is there a role for maybe NGOs and institutions, maybe even private sector through their CSR funds to step in to help and enable some of these programs that you're looking to run?
Yeah, definitely the NGOs participation is a must. But unfortunately, most of the NGOs also are not aware of the government rules and regulations in inviting the tenders. So we are interacting with many NGOs. So, and we are educating, we are giving our knowledge input to them. And if the same can be represented by the NGOs as well as Dickey, then when the voice goes from various corners and various stakeholders of the activity, then the government will also take it very serious. So we wanted NGOs to participate because now the NGOs are confined to giving the training, creating the awareness and some impact of the wrong practices. All that activity is going on. But the focus on developing entrepreneurship is not happening through NGOs. So we wanted all the NGOs also to focus on making the entrepreneur.
Yeah, so I think this is one of the most common themes and indeed the areas that we at India Sanitation Coalition work on is really these sort of collaborations where we can ensure that expertise such as is available with you at Dickey and your understanding of entrepreneurship can be brought to bear with NGOs and others who can be implementation partners as we help to skill those that need to be skilled. And in this case, particularly women, to help them develop the entrepreneurship skills in the areas that you have described. So I think that's an excellent example that you raised where there's an opportunity to work together. As we look at the funding packages therein, you know well that there have been many programs announced by the government. More recently, the Ubharte Sitare program by the finance minister. And funding, of course, is never enough. But what are these pressing requirements that need to be addressed to get women more engaged in these spaces, particularly as entrepreneurs, but also in terms of livelihood creation and skilling?
Yeah, as far as the funding pattern, again, it's a very serious matter because unless the money funding is support is not there, one cannot become an entrepreneur. Unfortunately, the urban local bodies, what they wanted, equipment. See, now the mechanization is taking place. and the mechanization cost is very high. When the mechanization cost is very high, the urban local bodies are not economically so sound to procure by itself. So what they are doing now is giving the service contract. So that service contract has to be executed through the machinery, and the cost of the machine is very high. So to procure that machine, one need to have a financial capacity to procure the machine. And for that, the government of initiatives, one initiative is there, that is Stand Up India, in which the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and any woman can get a funding up to 85% of the value of the equipment. So 15% is the margin money what they need to invest. So one such facility is available through Stand Up India. But the problem is the funding pattern is there, but the banker will come forward only when you have the assured business. Because the viability of the project, because the banker will fund on the basis of the viability. And the viability is proven, will be established only when they get a work order in their hand. And that work order, suppose if in some places they invite the tender only for 1 year, maybe for 2 years, maybe 3 years, 5 years, like that. So the whatever the funding we are taking from the financial institutions, and the banker will expect that to be repaid within the contract period. So that is a practical problem what the women entrepreneurs are facing. Likewise, even SC/ST entrepreneurs also facing the same problem. And there is one organization called National Safai Karmachari Finance Corporation. So their policies are something different from the financial institutions. So what they are doing, up to 5 lakh rupees, they are giving a subsidy of 2.5 lakhs. That is 50% subsidy they are giving. Like that, if the money increases, the subsidy amount is decreasing. So the maximum amount they can give finance for one individual is only 15 lakh rupees. Whereas the municipal urban body wanted a missionary costing around 25 lakhs. So in that case, they are unable to get the financial support from the National Safai Karmachari Finance Corporation. And their functionality is that they will not fund you directly. They will fund through the local government agency. Suppose in Hyderabad there is a case. So in Hyderabad, they will go through the channel agency called Telangana Scheduled Caste Finance Corporation or Telangana Women's Corporation. Like that, they wanted to go through agency. And the response depends on the functional positiveness of that particular corporation. So in this way also, people are unable to make use of the provisions made by the Ministry of Social Justice, Government of India. And another big challenge is there, up to 50 lakhs also they are going to fund, but they insist on there must be 4 entrepreneurs together as SHG group, the small help groups like that. Whereas in the contract is not given to SHG. The contract is given to the individuals. So by in this way also, the people are unable to use the facility provided by the government. So these are the practical challenges which need to be understood, and only the business people only can understand what is the practical difficulty. And if we are trying our level best with different platforms about the practical things which we are, which women and the SC/ST people are facing.
We're very fortunate to have Dicky focusing on these issues, because we do have all these big programs announced and available, as you rightly pointed out, for women. But the disconnect is being able to have women avail of this, both from the reality on the ground in terms of what you have described, but also a policy. where the disconnect between the 15 lakhs only being available, whereas a minimum 25 lakh requirement as per the bids that are encouraged. So I think this work must continue so that we can close the gap between intent and real world execution on the ground. And we'd be very happy to continue to work with you on this and to understand where we may play a role as well. But it's really, your experience there is invaluable. Yes, yes, Mr. Nara.
Madam,
Are you okay? You're having connectivity issues?
Yes, ma'am. I think
His
his
screen
camera
is, he's back, yeah.
sorry, I'm talking from phone and somebody is calling me. That
Yeah.
is being interruption.
Yeah.
Keeping the challenges being faced by the SCST and the women entrepreneur, we have developed a model, the practical model, which have been executed initially at Hyderabad, because everybody knows that by default, all the sanitation and the waste management related workers will be belongs to a particular community called scheduled caste community. Unfortunately, when the mechanization is taking place, these contracts were given to the people who has the financial capacity. And obviously, they don't belong to the scheduled caste. So over a period of time, what has happened? Earlier, they were employed by the municipalities on the government roles. But when the government started outsourcing the services, they are not recruiting any new Safai Karmacharis. So by that way, the unemployment has increased. And when the contract has gone to some other person, it is his discretion to appoint a person as per his choice. There is no control by the interventions for the government. So what is happening? The people who are engaged since ages in the same line of activity, they have lost a job. And the person who does not have not executed the similar work has entered as a contractor, and he replaced those employees with somebody else. So in the every place, these communities are the most sufferers now. So to solve this problem in Hyderabad, once there was two people died in the heavy rains while cleaning the drainage. So our Chief Minister KCR has visited the site and declared a financial compensation of ₹5 lakhs to each of the deceased. Then we, as a decade, read the news, the paper, and next day we approached the CM office, and through after 2-3 days we could able to get the appointment of the Honorable CM, and we told, sir, it's a good thing that you have given the compensation to them, but this compensation which you are giving will not be sufficient for them to lead the rest of the life, because one precious life of a family, the bread earner of the family is died, and if these 5 lakhs, they are not going to enjoy for more than a week, 1 year else. So then the CM asked, what is your suggestion? I said, sir, whoever is died in this line of activity, we wish that they must be given a contractual opportunity. Then that idea, liked by the CM, he advised the administration to have a dialogue with the Dicky people and formulate a policy for our state, how we can rehabilitate all these people. Then, as state officers told, they do not have any financial capacity to procure the machine. They don't have the managerial capacity, and they will not have any accountability. Like that, so many things they have expressed. Then we said the DIC is going to provide solutions for all your problems. So for that, what we have done, we have identified the people who have got deceased family members, and also those who are engaged in the Safai Karmachari activity. We have engaged, we have identified them, and we have given a rigorous training to them. and the government has prepared the tender. So we mentored them the documentation, how to file a tender, and we spoke to SBI Bank for giving the financial assistance. So like that, we developed a model which is win-win situation for all, and that has been executed successfully for the past 4 years in Hyderabad. And once those people who does not have the Aadhaar card, PAN card, now today they are the income tax payers, and the service which they are rendering is a very totally satisfied services they are giving. Citizens are very happy, the administration is happy, political parties are getting the political mileage by supporting all these people, financier is getting the regular payments, and the individual is also empowered, economic empowerment is taken. So this is the model which is a very successful model, happened in Hyderabad initially, and subsequently Delhi also we have executed one project. Now the second project we are doing, and I was delayed by 5 minutes. Because of that reason, I went for a training to contractors who are going to file a tender. So this is the way one success model created by Dickey. This has to be followed by the rest of the India. Then the change will take place in sanitation, technology utilization, mechanization of the sewerage and the waste management, and also the laborers who are engaged in this kind of activity also will be benefited.
Mr. Nara, we've come to the end of our session. I do want to thank you for these great insights. From our perspective at the India Sanitation Coalition, we would absolutely like to see a replication of this model which you have just talked about in Hyderabad. And as you yourself have rightly said, this should become a national rollout. And we would certainly like to work with you to ensure that this dissemination takes place. You've also indicated how important it is to have just transitions. When we transition from one way of doing things, which is not necessarily the best way just because it brings its own risks, we move to what we think is a cleaner and more sanitized way, but in the process, we cannot afford to leave people behind. And the worst outcome would be exactly as you have recorded, that through this mechanization, the people who most need the jobs are the ones that are getting left out. So again, working to ensure that everyone can move together in progress is going to be important, and again, a very important mission. So delighted to have you on our program, and for the very deep insights you have provided today. And we look forward to working together going forward. Chaitali, over to you.
Thank you.
You're on mute, Chaitali. Thank you, Mr. Nara. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nara. Thank you, Naina ma'am. Now, next, we move on to a nice panel discussion. We have 4 participants. We have 4 panelists from diverse places. One is from a corporate, and I'll quickly introduce all of them. Before that, I'd like to introduce the moderator of this panel discussion. This is Ms. Saili Udas Mankikar, who's a senior fellow from the Observer Research Foundation. Saili, over to you. If you can quickly introduce the panelists.
Okay. Thank you, Chaitali. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, ISC, for this wonderful insight. I mean, we opened with so many thoughts, and I think we should hope to build on that. And this panel is what I'm going to aim at, and I think there was a lot of food for thought for that. So, welcome, everyone. Good evening. Today's panel is about women's livelihood in the post-COVID sanitation economy. You know, when this topic actually came up, we were thinking of post-COVID, but I think we will also talk about COVID, pre-COVID, and post-COVID, because like Naina ma'am just said, we have to think about a just recovery or an inclusive recovery. So I'll introduce you to today's esteemed panel. We have Ms. Jayalakshmi Chekala. She is the former Joint Secretary of Water and Sanitation, and now works with the All India Institute of Local Self-Government. We have Mr. Sunil Jahagirdar.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. We have Mr. Sunil Jahagirdar, who is the General Manager of NABARD. We have Mr. Rajiv Kher, who is the founder and CEO of Saraplast. we have Anandita Khakkar. She's a leading leader marketing of South Asia from SATO. And like Chaitali said, I'm Saili Udas Mankikar. I'm a senior fellow from the Observer Research Foundation and your moderator for this evening. When we thought of this panel, we thought that we should look at two important aspects of the sanitation economy debate, where women are at its epicenter. And this debate is irrespective of their social strata, really. It could be more of the financial strata, but less of the social strata. It is across. The pandemic has, so did all these problems that we're going to speak about or what we spoke about already exist? Yes, they already existed, but the pandemic has only amplified existing issues of health and livelihoods and have put women at the lowest end of the spectrum. And the informal frontline sanitation workers are at the highest risk. The pandemic must be looked at as an opportunity to ensure that the post-COVID recovery focuses on the interlinkages between sanitation, gender, and livelihood. We hope to be able to come up with some action points after this discussion today. So let me jump into the first round of questions, really. And I would, we have 1 hour, so I would like our panelists to keep it short, but also, vividly explain what they think about, what we are posing to them. So round one, I think we can take 7 minutes each to respond to these questions, and then we'll have 2 other rounds. So let me first come to our government representative, Chekala ma'am. So the question here is that, India has definitely made a lot of progress in building toilets since SBM 1 and also is making certain strides with SBM 2. But the problems of health of women owing to access to sanitation and water still exist. And these have multiplied during the pandemic. This has had a visible impact on their livelihoods, which is a determinant of the economic and social health of a woman. What are your views on how this has to be tackled? And do we need to have a renewed focus here? Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I'm audible. Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. And really, he in SBM 1 and as well as SBM 2, government has really taken care of access for the women at all strata, especially when it comes to the individual toilet as well as for community toilet and also for the shared toilet. And we can see that the priority has always been given in SBM to the women. Priority has been given to the women who are the household head, pregnant women, senior citizen, like that. So it was for individual as well as for the community toilets also. So there was planning for that. And it was also envisaged that while if individual toilets are there, beneficiaries should apply for that. And it has come to notice that people are left behind, households are left behind, and they are not able to get the subsidy that is available for them. So in SBM2, there are provision to get the individual toilet facilities for them also. Those who are left behind, priority is given to them also. So we will now focus, if there are individual toilet accessibility, then they might not have face any difficulty during this pandemic unless they have maintained their toilets in a good shape and with a proper behavior, operation maintenance and cleanliness. So far as community toilets are concerned, we will focus on that. While building and constructing the community toilets, the government has issued orders that prior to the construction of such toilets, community opinion should be taken. They should be taken in a confidence, and what type of toilet they wanted there, what type of facilities, and also a promise from them that they will take care of all these facilities. Will use that at what we can say, with the availability of water will keep that in a clean like that. So if that hello.
Jagirdar sir, can you just mute yourself, please?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Mr. Check, ma'am, please continue.
Yeah. So if while constructing and making available the community toilets, if this proper process as envisaged has not been taken, then there are problems for access to these community facilities. And care has already been taken to make available lots of water, plenty of water, but then it also depends on the behavior of the community. So proper behavior for keeping clean the environment and using the water, because when we have gone for the what we can say for planning for the SLWM plans for urban also as well as for rural also, the tank was full of the water, but then toilets were not cleaned. So first is that behavior should be in that way. People should behave in that way to keep the toilets clean. They should take the responsibility of keeping the this community facility. So that, I think that is lacking. And every time we can see that community facilities are always not taken care of that. So first is that proper planning and the consent and promise from the community to take the care of the operation and maintenance of the community toilets. This is one of the reason, and I will say another reason is that many a times social miscreants, social mongers, they are always at the mischief. Most of the time we have seen that the community toilets are damaged that are made for the women especially. So electricity is not there, even if water is there, doors are not properly could not be locked. So because of these women are reluctant to use all these facilities, and always it is not possible for to make the expenditure on this always. So I think community should, I will say there should be a darara, some authoritative, we can say that darara, there should be a social darara to make all the community facilities to maintain in a proper shape. So this is a second reason I will say, and that is the responsibility of the local leader as well as the local community. They should ensure that this should not happen. And third one is that to maintain the community facility, always we need money. We need user charges, but then people are not, they are not ready to pay that. Something should be some should be they should be ready to pay for that. Otherwise, it is very difficult for the ULBs, if it is a rural or if it is a urban, to maintain the these community toilets and all the community facilities. So I see all these three reasons are main behind not maintaining the community facilities, especially the community toilets. And this is the effect, I will say, for in the during the pandemic, even during non-pandemic time, if the shape of the community toilets or the facilities of this shape, it is very difficult for the community to use such type of a facility during the pandemic, because it was also not possible to get the water. Also, access was not, there because of the lockdown. Also, it was not possible to access the toilet if they are not near to the their home. That problem was also there. So these are the issues but that can be solved. Now I think a pandemic is almost over, we can say. But then after pandemic, what we should ensure that this should not happen again after the pandemic, and we should ensure some discipline in the community, and also the local leader and also the community both should ensure proper use of the community facilities, I will say. And also they should be ready to give some of the user charges so that the facilities can be maintained properly. And what I will say is that habit must they change in a proper way to use that.
Thank you, Chekala ma'am. I think what you're trying to highlight is the whole focus on behavioral change. And I think that is the point at which I want to get Mr. Jahagirdar in. Actually, he represents NABARD, Development Finance Institute, that has supported WASH initiatives and livelihoods extensively through their literacy program on sanitation. Now, this program has created a fairly detailed and spread out financial literacy network that has benefited women. So, Mr. Jahagirdar, we would like to know your experience of this program and your endeavors in literacy, the outcomes of such a program and the impact that it has made.
Okay, soon after the pandemic struck us, we thought that it is just not enough to have financial products, because NABARD, as you are aware, is a development financial institution. So we felt that it is not enough to have only financial products to tackle the pandemic, but we thought that it would also be important to have skilling, reskilling, and also literacy to educate the general population, and especially the rural population that we are catering to take care of themselves regarding sanitation. So we organized this campaign across 2,000 of the most remote locations across the country, more specifically the left-wing extremist affected areas, tribal areas, the Northeast. And we covered over 1 lakh families, so that is around about 5 lakh plus people in these programs. So then we also showed them videos on how to hand wash and how to maintain sanitation. And I think this had a great effect in controlling the pandemic, especially in the rural areas, because, more particularly what happened was the migrants started moving out of the cities and then reaching the villages. So there was a very big danger that this infection would spread into remote areas of the country. So we were able to, I think, and we made a good mark in trying to restrict this particular pandemic to a great extent in the rural areas. We also felt that it is not enough to have only a literacy campaign or a sanitation campaign. We felt it important that the migrants who are without a job now have to be reskilled. So we started programs, especially in the areas where there was a large migration from Mumbai, in Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Odisha, Jharkhand, Bihar. So a very large number of programs were conducted to reskill the migrants because they will have to now take up activities which they were not used to, or maybe they had traditional skills when they had migrated, and those skills had to be refurbished. Besides that, the SHGs were trained to make masks. And then, there was a very big lacuna because the artisans could not reach the markets. So we came out with virtual exhibitions rather than the general public exhibitions that used to be held, so that the artisans and handicraftsmen and weavers could get an opportunity to market their produce. We went in for digital marketing of products. Besides that, one very important initiative that we took was the program My Pad, My Right. So this was launched in collaboration with Padma Shri Arunachalam, who we all know is addressed as Padman of India. So menstrual hygiene, which Chitali referred to, is an important area. So the SHGs which were without work during this pandemic were trained. In each district, we identified, in each state, we identified one district where we could first launch this program. And the women SHGs were trained to manufacture these masks. And then we came out with a branding, and across the country now these pads are available under the brand name of My Pad, My Right. There's a common logo with these pads. And there's also a need that what has been observed in studies is that many of the women would prefer to buy one single pad rather than to have a whole supply for the month. So it has been uniquely supplied as one single pad, and it comes with its own disposable wrapper to maintain the sanitation. So these are just some of the initiatives we took. Besides this, on the financial aspect, if you see, we also gave funding support to the banks at the concessional rates for wash activities. This was made available at a very low rate of interest to banks, MFIs and NBFCs. So these are just some of the interventions that NABARD took for the wash activities, especially with respect to COVID.
Thank you, Mr. Jagirdar, for sharing those experiences. And I think now we can, clearly segue into this whole topic of two important points that you brought up, and we naturally go into that. One is about wash finance, and the second topic is about entrepreneurship and enterprise. And that's where I would like to bring Rajiv Kher in. Now, Rajiv is, when I got introduced to him, he mentioned himself as a Sanipreneur. I think it's a very, that's a new emerging space, and women definitely want to get into that space. Now, Rajiv, during the pandemic, we saw an enhanced movement of Sani products and regulations that boosted the need for hygiene products related to prevention, cleaning, and disposal of medical and sanitary waste. Several women-led SHGs came up. We saw startups getting involved in this. So I would like to know from you that what this disruption really meant from a small enterprise like yours, and whether there is commensurate wash finance to support these enterprises.
So yeah, thanks a lot, Riley, and thank you very much for having me on this particular forum. So I just like to, I don't want to take too much of time. I'd make it as short and snappy as possible. So I think from the perspective of the disruption that happened, I think as an organization, Saraplast has always been innovative and looking at creating enterprise value as well as micro enterprise creation and involving women, and a lot to do with gender equality. I think one of the
I think we have
Rajiv's screen is
Rajiv.
Initiatives that really.
Rajiv, we just lost you for a minute. Can you just recap, please? Thank you.
So basically, Saraplast has been, in the front of innovation and sanitation, as well as creating enterprise solutions and micro entrepreneurs. And I think we've created a lot of women entrepreneurs by way of the T bus or the pink bus that we've created, which is an upcycled old municipal bus which has been made into a toilet. We've used a lot of smart tech, smart sanitation solutions in that, which have enabled us to get a lot of data. But at the same time, we haven't really gotten in a situation where we've had to get rid of people. The whole idea is, how can we uplift people who have been doing the same job manually to give them an opportunity to do it using technology. I think Mr. Nara touched upon this, and also to some extent, the synergy of what Dickey stands for and what we're talking about is pretty much on the same line. So I don't want to reiterate what he said. But yes, creating micro entrepreneurs, and that's the way forward. We've been in the front of it and have actually created enterprise value, as well as entrepreneurs who are coming forward to work in this space. The second part of it is, what did the pandemic do? Well, the pandemic actually created a lot of disruption, a lot of havoc initially, and business went down. But then, we always have, when you have an adverse situation, you come out with creativity, and there's a lot of opportunity in adversity. So what we realized was that we had a lot of stock that we'd created to make these toilets and a lot of stock that we had to build them. What we did was we converted them into makeshift hospitals. So we created mobile hospitals and provided them for COVID care. And the material is the same. We just had to, build these and install them on site in record time. And we did that for the rural areas. And we're doing about 3 projects right now, which we did so well that we've gotten some incredible response for it. So it's a portable mobile hospital with 100 beds, with oxygen, with everything. So like I said, disruption comes in any form, where from toilets to creating hospitals. I mean, who would have imagined? So we have a lot of women working on our team. And I think the initiative, in fact, a woman manager leads this program. And we believe that it has given a lot of impetus to a lot of people, a lot of women and ladies to come forward and work. So yes, the sanitation space has a lot of potential for women. In fact, I don't know if you're aware, but the United States has maximum number of women working in the sanitation space. And as Mr. Nara said, unfortunately, that's not the case in India. But I think it will change because the sanitation economy and the circular economy does definitely provide a lot of potential for women to be a part of this entire ecosystem. I think, yeah, that's about it from my side. And we'll come back to the other points later on about what I would really request from the municipality and governments.
Thank you, Rajiv, for this very pointed kind of discussion points which we'll take ahead. Let me come to Anandita now, and we've got this nice 40 feet view from Rajiv, and we can go a little like up, zoom up, and talk to Anandita, because they have like this global presence, 40 countries, and to kind of understand from you, Anandita, that the pandemic did see disruptions even at your level, right? Where we saw I read about the Sato tab that you came up with, and this was dealing with SDG 6, hand washing and water and sanitation and hand washing. So I would like to kind of shed some light on, and you have also partnered with training of women mason workers, right, to fix these products. So I would like you to shed some light on the learnings and challenges of the disruptive experience here from that kind of view, and the issue of skilling and capacity development there.
Thank you first for having me in this discussion. I think there's some excellent points which have been brought up. So let me start with the disruption. Obviously, like, we understand that when the pandemic started, the everyday work, everybody's work was completely disrupted. So may that be in rural India, in anything which was non-essential or was called non-essential had to take a back seat. And I would say that a lot of times also the conversation, so like the NGOs or, like Rajiv has said, that the various other kind of partners of sanitation, they had now shifted their focus to hand washing, to hygiene, because, that was where they knew that toilets, I won't say took a back seat, but yes, definitely hand washing became important. And in that respect, what we also realized was that we are part of the SDG 6, we need to provide 25 million people, by 2025. But what we also at the company realized that there is a need for hygiene to be also looked at. So like just simply, if you look at the UNICEF numbers in itself, everybody said that yes, hygiene is important, and we need to have more people. The rhetoric was of hand washing, but 2.3 billion people in 2020 still lacked access to hand washing facilities, basic hand washing facility, and that's where the Sato tap idea originated. And from the point of let's work with this, let's create something, to actually having it delivered to communities across the globe, it was only 6 months, and that too in the middle of the pandemic. So I think that's something which, as a private company and, partnering with companies such as UNICEF, and the ideas and the changes that we wanted to make, the suggestions, it just made us sure that these are the products which the customer needs. Like easy accessibility, the product is simple to not just make, but also like maintain, and obviously water saving. So, picking up from the idea that more women, and especially during the pandemic, with more women having to stay at home and number of people increasing at home, right? Kids were not going to work, others were not going to work. We also, identified, and we've always believed that there is that need for having, making women challenging them making it sure that they don't have to go out for water. So our products save 80 to 90% of the water. So, the trips that they need to get the water is saved. I'm just going to jump on to I think the second part of the question that you said about the learnings and the challenges. And I think it's always good to start with the learnings rather than the challenges. So Sato has partnered with a lot of, with a couple of Indian NGOs, etc., to get the women to become masons and plumbers, partners in sanitation, actually giving them that skills. So I think a couple of things which we definitely need to understand is, women are more affected by poor sanitation. So that also drives them. It also gives them a better drive to provide better solutions. They definitely want to be more independent. They want to have, I think they also kind of need to prove themselves. So they have to kind of push themselves harder. They also have a better influence in their group. What I mean by that is, if we kind of train one woman and they see, and other women see it rise, they will, bring together a community which wants to then be a part of that conversation. And they also create communities which support each other. I just, if I am given the opportunity, if it's okay, I would just like to share like a really small, like a testimonial that we have created. Would that be okay for us to just, it's a 35-second, just like a video we'd like to share, if that's okay with the panel?
Sure. Yeah, Nandita.
Yeah. Okay. It's just saying it's disabled. If you could just.
I think I just need to give you the sharing rights.
Yes, please.
Done. Yeah.
Thank you. So this is, an actual real testimonial of a Mason who we have worked with and who we have trained, and just, the opportunity that she feels being a part of it. So this is just a quick, short 34-second. Just, sorry, I think I'll have to just stop share and share again because I forgot to share the audio also. And there you go.
मैं सुशीला बाई कुशवाहा, ग्राम रतनपुर, बनगामा पंचायत, समर्थन से काम से मेला मिस्त्री का काम दिया। मेला मिस्त्री का काम हमने सीखा। समस्या हुई थी, बहुत आदमी हंसते सर। समस्या ये होती, कहते करेंगे क्या करेंगे काम? कहाँ से करेंगे मेला मिस्त्री काम? जे तो चूल्हे चकिया करती थी, रोटी पानी का काम। केला के नाम बदनाम कर रही केला मेलों को। जब मजदूरी करने जाते हैं तो वहाँ शर्म नहीं है, तो मेला मिस्त्री में काहे की शर्म?
So I think she kind of does cover, your benefits and challenges, the learnings and challenges right there, that there is definitely that learning that they want to do it, and more of them do get together. And within that one Samarthan, we were able to, get a lot more women together to join in. And just moving on quickly again, extending to the same conversation that she has is the challenges. Definitely, I think some of them is that toilet work, construction, and mason work, plumbing work, etc., is still looked at as like a man's job. So I think the acceptance of women is still, the barriers are quite high for that. Sanitation as a conversation, us obviously sitting here, we do this, but sanitation as a conversation is still quite taboo, especially, a conversation between different ages, different sexes, talking to each other about that. I think that is another thing which has been a challenge. And one of the things which also was like during the pandemic, schools and work opportunity, it has been that, we've seen a decline because more women had to stay at home and work for this. And I also wanted to just pick up very on what Rajiv had said about the circular sanitation sanitation economy. I think that's extremely essential to be brought into the discussion, because it's only when we understand that, make in India, sell in India, skill in India, and only then does the whole sanitation circle work. And just, a lot of the private companies are understanding it wherever we go, may that be India, Bangladesh, Africa, we make sure that, you know, we are making in that specific country, and women are a part of that conversation. Women are a part of that training. In Africa, we do a lot of women mason trainings. We had actually worked with them during the pandemic to upgrade school toilets, because like in India, in Africa and other countries, schools are not just a place of education, but also where the community comes together. You know, like they're used for, like in the pandemic, they were used as makeshift hospitals or quarantine shelters. So I think that's something which, you know, if we understand that we need to have that circular economy, we need to have that private-public partnership to come together. And I think that's where, you know, we can work and make sure that there is more partnership and conversation. So I think that's it for. Thank you.
Thank you, Anandita. I think we will take this conversation forward in the next round, because we'll have a question related to that. Chaitali, are we welcoming questions from the audience? So
Yes,
then I can
yes,
make that
we are.
announcement. Okay, so everyone, please put your questions in the chat box, but please also write the name of the panelist alongside, so that we are able to address the person to whom you want to ask the question. So please feel free to put it in the chat box, and we will take it after the second round, because we have a few questions that we want to kind of take forward. Let me come back to Chekala ma'am again. And, you know, Chekala ma'am, we've just spoken about, you know, the circular economy and finance. But there is one part that, you know, when we kind of talk about, when we spoke about COVID and the informal workforce and women, so if we spoke about the frontline sanitation worker, the ASHA worker, migrant women who were involved in building toilets and sanitation facilities, social security and financial security was a huge topic that came up. And an ORF report that we did, we mentioned this as, you know, something called a chrome helmet, which is a protection that is needed. So what are your thoughts, you know, from the government perspective on social and financial security and insurances for wash workers in the informal sector? Who should provide the security, and what are your thoughts on this?
Presently, I'm working in a Maharashtra Urban Wash and Environmental
Yes.
Sanitation EAS coalition that has been formed by the regional center, RCS, at All India Institute of Local Self-Government, and that is in partnership with the UNICEF, Maharashtra. And that secretariat has already been started from April 21st. We have taken one project, response to the COVID-19 with the support of the UNICEF, and that has been being implemented in the 9 municipal corporations of the Maharashtra state. And in that project, we have planned, we will be covering in all these 10 to 13 slum area, around 250,000 population. We will be reaching through the awareness campaign and also distribution of the wash supplies. But the main focus is also that not only making awareness or distributing the wash supplies, through the household survey, random household survey, we will be just like during the pandemic and pre-pandemic and after pandemic, what will be the picture of the household on the sample basis, so that we are preparing need gap assessment report, and on the basis of that we will be preparing micro plan also. And we are also taking feedback formats from the community as well as individuals. So I think, we have already covered these frontline workers in this program. So we will definitely get some information from these project reports, what are their thoughts and what they are thinking on the social security, what type of social security, and also financial security. Yes, definitely they should have a social security. As I was mentioning in the previous round of question, even toilet facilities, social mongers are there, they are damaging. So here the question is of a human being, and especially women. So it is very essential. But then social security, when we want to provide, we will definitely think on that line. Government should also, and for insurance also, we have government has already started on that line. But for that, they have to register. And as we have pointed out, that all these sanitation workers are from the informal sector, unorganized sector. So it is very necessary to organize all these sanitation worker through some medium. Then only it will be possible to plan for social security, and also for their, I will say, financial security, because that is very important for planning of any government program. That is very necessary. And I will suggest that the project we are implementing, some focus should be, some focus is on that also, what type of social security will be needed by them, and financial security also, because in our project also, we have proposed to provide them social security as well as financial insurance also. So I think this will give some impetus to our thoughts.
Ma'am,
But
do
definitely
you?
we will have to do that. We have to organize them at some level. Without any organization, it will not be possible to make a policy, I will say.
Thank you, Chekala ma'am. Actually, I was looking at if you can give us some, insights into who could be the players in this field to get in partnership with the government, since we have a lot of corporates here, we have bankers here. I mean, from that perspective, anything that you would like to put in, add in?
Yeah, definitely. Because I said all these sanitation workers and ASHA workers. ASHA workers, I can say they are already organized because they are registered with the government, working with government. So we can plan definitely for them. But then in informal sector, the sanitation workers are working. For them, it will be definitely useful to if the private sectors, corporate sectors will come forward. And I will say to have to look at the result of these, because of course private sectors and corporate sectors will not just give a financial security and social security to all the workers. Some principles should be, we have to chalk out on what basis we will give them financial security and social security. So that will have to be, first we will have to chalk out on what points they will be providing the financial security to all these sanitation workers. And definitely one, I suggest on a pilot basis we could take this, and what are the results of that pilot projects, we can go forward. Because for construction workers, the government has planned for the insurance. They have to register with the government, and then they are getting insured, and they are getting security, financial security. So we will have to think on that. The main problem is those numbers who are working in informal sector, that we will have to take into account, and that system we will have to first build up.
Thank you, Chekala ma'am. Actually, Rajiv has put in quite an interesting point here. Maybe Rajiv, you want to come in since there is a continuation to what Chekala ma'am was saying.
Happy.
Yes, Rajiv, you're talking about blended finance and
Yeah, so I think I think we've touched upon this, and Mrs. Kidwai spoke about for-profit companies coming forward. What is the way to creatively get finance? And then there lies the problem, right? That there's no finance available for sanitation companies, primarily because either they're too small or they can't raise collateral guarantees or whatever it is. Now, my suggestion was that instead of we keep getting a lot of CSR funding coming by our way. And one of the ideas that came to my mind was that instead of taking that money upfront into developing something, why not speak to the CSR company and say, look, why don't you not give us the money? Instead, make a deposit, keep it in the banks for a period of 10 years. Because what a sanitation company or for this sector, what you need is patient capital. And the capital doesn't necessarily have to be equity, because debt is far cheaper than equity. So if you get debt at a lower interest rate, which is financed by the CSR as a CSR fund, which comes into as a deposit into banks, which can just be a counter guarantee instead of collateral for these smaller entrepreneurs to build up their businesses, to build up that particular skill trade, whatever you call it, and actually provide services to the government, grow your company, and then at the end of it, maybe 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, whatever it is, instead of taking that money, maybe a corporate gets a small interest also on that, and the money is safe, plus that money has impacted the lives of more people, and it has actually created enterprise value to so many organizations. So I would really appreciate if, as a part of creating this financial ecosystem for sanitation, if large corporates or large organizations like NABARD, for example, if they can come forward with a concept or an idea like this. Now, of course, I'm not a banker. This is just a creative entrepreneur just throwing out some ideas and some kind of creativity where finance can be built. But I have faced this problem over many years, and I think there are so many people who are even haven't reached the stage which our company has luckily reached, because we've got private equity funding, we've got venture capital funding and all that. But smaller organizations to grow definitely need finance. They definitely need access to capital. And I think their access to capital with the conservative banking system that we have in India, I think a very good way forward could be this. So maybe if they work as a counter guarantor to loans which these people have taken, would be the best way forward. Lower interest rates, comfort for the entrepreneur, also an element of paying back. So, everything kind of works out, and the ecosystem and the circular economy does build up very largely.
Thank you, Rajiv. And he's made my life easier. I can just get Sunil Jahagirdar in, and if you want to kind of respond to Rajiv. And, yes, Mr. Jahagirdar.
In fact, we have got a very good exposure to funding for sanitation. So as you had just mentioned, we have funded over 15,000 crores for construction of toilets alone. And NABARD is open to the idea of supporting banks, microfinance institutions, NBFCs, other agencies also for sanitation activities. So I don't think funding should be a constraint when it comes to sanitation. When you look at challenges, if you want to look at challenges, the problem that we are having is that we do not get agencies which could actually be implementing these programs. Where we have worked with a very large number of NGOs, and they have given soft loans to people for construction of toilets, and we have noticed that the recovery rate is over 98%. So we don't need a guarantee fund for sanitation. People have realized the importance of it. In fact, people prefer to take a loan rather than to avail of subsidy from the government for construction of toilets. So because it is quicker, it is more easily accessible. So that this is our experience. When you look at challenges again in the field, if you look at it, 4 out of 10 women have lost their jobs. 80% of domestic workers, if you see, are women, and they have not been paid in the last, when the pandemic has taken place. So, when we look at WASH as an activity, we are just looking at toilets, which I feel is we are focusing, our attention is not going to the area that we should be looking at. We should look at the whole spectrum of WASH. Especially, I look at, training women for acting as masons, as SATO has been doing. We also have trained over 10,000 women for taking up welding, plumbing, masonry work, and they have been doing excellent work. Besides this, we also would like to look at water. supply of clean drinking water, and to make those toilets that have already been constructed more productive and more, utility of those toilets should come up. So we need, running water in those toilets. We also look at waste disposal, we look at waste recycling. I'll give you an example of how things can change when it comes to livelihoods. When we are on the topic of livelihoods, we are speaking. So we have an OFPO. This is an off-farm producer company in Mizoram. It's the Ramlai Handloom Producer Company. So out of the 800 odd women or 800 odd members in this producer company, 725 are women. And we supported them for about 1.5 crore rupees, which was given as a grant. And they took a loan of another 2 crore rupees. And today they have repaid their loan 100%. And they are making a turnover of something like 69 lakhs. This is their figure of 2020-21, last financial year when the COVID was at its peak. So this is the time when they made 69 lakh turnover. And what they have done is they were earlier traditional weavers, and they have diversified from making their traditional Mizoram fabrics to fabrics which cater to the modern market. So it's, livelihoods for women can be thought of, we need a different strategy for it. Another example I'll give you is, in Meghalaya, it's known as the broom capital of the country. It produces something like a 1.25 lakh tons of broom grass. That's the quantum of grass that is grown over there. And it sells at, a measly price of just 40 rupees per kilogram. Whereas the brooms that you buy in the market are sold at 100 to 150 rupees a broom. And from 1 kg of broom grass, you can make 3 brooms. So with a very small amount, in the same range, 1.5 crore is what we are giving them. They will be able to manufacture these brooms and sell it. 450 women are going to be involved in it. And their incomes, we expect them to be earning about a lakh plus from the measly amount of maybe 15,000, 20,000 that they are earning. So, we should look at the entire spectrum of providing livelihoods. Once livelihoods come in and then the living standards increase, automatically I feel the sanitation needs of the people will get taken care of, which we have experienced in watershed areas and tribal development areas, which we are supporting.
Thank you, Mr. Jahagirdar. Natasha, you wanted to come in, right? Please.
सेवा अब उपलब्ध है केवल वी अनलिमिटेड पैक्स पर। आपके लिए उत्तम अनलिमिटेड ऑफर्स।
Yeah, Natasha, please. We can't hear you actually, Natasha.
Ma'am? Ma'am, I think, no, we cannot hear you. Wait, let me mute you and then unmute you again. 1 second. Okay. Ma'am, please. Okay. No, not yet. Not as yet.
Okay. Maybe you want to log in again and.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So I'll come to Anandita, and then when Natasha logs in again, we'll go to her. Anandita, so on this topic, I know you have a lot to say as well. And, when we were speaking earlier, you were speaking on reversal of growth and household incomes impacting women. So, your experience from so many countries, any sharings from these different sites all over the world that you could bring in into this topic?
Yes, thank you for that. I just kind of wanted to, highlight, I think the conversation that Mr. Rajiv and, Mr. Jahagir.
Yeah, go ahead.
I thought those were very, very, interesting points, and absolutely, financial scaling, and we need to come together. So that will be a part of the call to action. But, I do believe that there needs to be that extension of not just skilling them and saying, here the skill, but also providing them the tools to, go forward with that skill. How can they upgrade themselves, etc. And I think, a lot of companies, just like our private sector companies, they want to be more a part of the entrepreneurial journey, because, a company's profit also kind of depends on there in a lot of ways. They also are equally connected. If they do well, we do well. So I think there is that, not just in terms of yes, we need to do this as something good for the society, but also like it's an essential part of our growth, as a private sector. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that, and I felt that really added to the conversation. And just taking from your question there, Sally, the biggest, I think one of the biggest things that, apart from the obvious causes which we've discussed, like, halt of non-essential commodity production, halt in skilled and non-skilled labor destruction. I think one of the biggest also which happened was that construction kind of took a back seat because, it was deemed as non-essential. And in India, nearly 70% of the migrant labor is employed, where 70% of migrant labor is employed. I think making that kind of non-essential for a large chunk of the year, it was made them really impossible to make any kind of money, send money back home. I mean, we have a couple of examples. We've done 13,000 mason trainers across India before the pandemic. And in 2020 we saw quite a drastic drop because at the end of the day they don't have as much digital access. But I think there is also a silver lining here, that there was also like a drastic increase in, say, the digital usage of the last leg influencers. So we saw we saw about 20% increase in people using the internet, so through their phones, WhatsApp, YouTube, Facebook. And we also as a team found ways to connect with them through WhatsApp, like keep upgrading them, and during this time. And also because we stayed connected with them, gave them ideas, business ideas, where can you use the Sato product. So we have a really interesting case study, and I think this kind of works with the sanitation economy, is that while there were people who were going back, like Mr. Jagadish said, that there was a reverse migration into the rural India. I think one of the things that we saw was that because we have been working with masons, creating them, making them from just masons to small entrepreneurs. So they become our influencers, and then they also start stocking with us. So they are skilled, and they also, because the product is easily available and is quite economical, they're able to stock, say, a small amount. So they have been able to move from just a skill to making profit of that. And in that same context, when the reverse migration was happening, something which came up was that all the states like Odisha, UP, Bihar, they were looking at when these migrants were coming back, where will they stay before they get back to their homes, and what if they're bringing bringing COVID with them. So they were creating quarantine shelters, makeshift quarantine shelters in schools, in stadiums, etc. And they obviously needed safe sanitation there. And just a small conversation with the Mason Mart saying that the rest of the area is not open. There is no retail store open. Why don't you become our retail and go? So they had the skills, they had the products, and they were actually able to get these products, and were able to put these products in these quarantine shelters. 600 quarantine shelters were fitted with Sato products in anywhere between 2 to 3 months. And it's touched the life of nearly 20,000 people. And this is only in like 2 states. So I think also that, like working with them, not just giving them a skill set, but kind of, working with them over time, keep pushing them to do, because they also want to make sure that, they want to do better, they want to grow. So if we give them those opportunities, and same with the finance, is that once they have that confidence, once they have that business building skill, then I think even like microfinancing, connecting them to microfinancing would be very easy. We are running this across Africa. In Southeast Asia, we did train the trainers. So we digitally trained people who are going to now use not just our products, but also sanitation. We train them through the digital. So there has been a lot of opportunity because there has been a shift in movement. Yes, of course, nothing compares to face-to-face interactions, and obviously train on-ground skill training. But there are these opportunities of building with them, learning, teaching them not just here is a skill, but also kind of what can you do with the skill, how can you grow, and pushing them with that. So I think that's something which I just wanted to highlight over here.
Thank you, Anandita. And I'll come to the issue of skilling. But before that, Natasha, over to you.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes.
so this is actually a question to the entire panel, and I wanted to introduce it here because I think it's very, very relevant to what you are all alluding to. You know, I think there are two levels. One is organic change when we talk about finance, and then the other is inorganic change. And I think India could not have survived if we hadn't had, companies like Saraplast or Sato and the fantastic work that they are doing with regards to helping the sanitation economy grow, and specifically women grow with that, right? So, but for these are organic changes. These are things that are happening in small bite-sized pieces. And, we would need 1 million Satos and 1 million Saraplasts to actually help to, bring about a totally clean India, if we can call it that, right? So what we're really asking here today, and I'm going to put this big, hairy question out there for all of you, is what is the inorganic change that we require? Because if we are to meet the 2030 SDG 6 requirement, India is not even a fraction of the way towards doing it. And, 2030 is just around the corner. So effectively, we need very, very big, bold movements from ourselves. That's the civil society. And I think we are genuinely putting our, best foot forward, but a lot more needs to be done there. And definitely we need to work with the government. So, that is my big question to you. Example, if you take banks, right? Banks say that, so there are only two forms of financing today currently available for WASH. One is the subsidies that the government gives, and the other, and the CSR, of course, which is like a subsidy. And the other is, of course, the bank credit, right? The microfinance credit. Beyond that, we have not progressed. Yeah. And my question is, why are there so few startups, for example, in this particular sector? Why have we not been able to encourage more startups to come and actually, populate this sector and create good ideas with regards to innovation and automation? That is something that, we should reflect on. Why do banks get limited by their credit policies? If they genuinely want to go and help the last mile, then why do they consider women, without, a background in terms to support them, economic background, why are they not considered for bank loans? I mean, these are very basic questions, but we don't ask them. We don't put them out there when we are considering policies. And that is, that is the piece that I think we really need to reflect on. So I'm just going to leave it there, but I'd really love to hear the panel if they have any ideas around that. Thank you.
Who would like to come in? Anyone? Rajiv or Jagirdar?
Yeah,
Rajiv.
Actually, that was a great question and a great ask. I mean, very difficult really to give one answer to this. But I think the biggest problem that I have seen is the stigma that's around this subject. I think that's the single largest. It's very easy to. There are no entry barriers to this business. There are no entry barriers for any company to come over and start. But yet there are not that many people. And the only reason that I can think of, and which I have seen over a period of time, is stigma. I think it's changed a lot over a period of time. I think since 2014, since the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan started, we've at least started talking toilets on the table, which is what I like to say, because over a period of time, our cultural ethos has always been, when you're on a dining table, don't talk about shit. Now, at least we're talking about shit and toilets on the dining table. I think that is a big first step. The second thing I think that really has not been able to scale up this business or create 1 million Saraplasts or 1 million Satos is, I think, because the financial mechanism is not yet suitable, or when the bankers and the government themselves are really convinced that this is going to change the lives of people, that's when the money will come in. It happened for the IT industries in the early 90s. They formed an IT park. Why can we not form a circular sanitation park, like an IT park? Why not have all these businesses in one area, allocate 100 acres, 200 acres to all these businesses, let them come there, create an ecosystem, and let it become like a export promotion zone or whatever you may call it. We need to have some solid policy to push towards creating this, because to answer your question, how do we scale it? How do we reach the SDG 6 goals in 2030? You need that traction, you need that unity. And I think to form an association, maybe a lead can be taken by your association to form this kind of mechanism with maybe few people that represent private entities like myself or Sato, and become an organization to really take it to the government and say, look, you need to create an ecosystem like you did for the IT industry. Only then will the SHIT industry succeed. I think that's the only way going forward. So two things from my side. One is that definitely the stigma that goes around it. So create a glamour around it, create a sort of an aura as to what it's going to create in the near future. Don't call it toilets, don't call it whatever, sanitation, economy, sanipreneurs. I think that's the way to go. And the second part of it is, let's go to the government with some solid mega blueprint plan. I think Dicky, along with Dr. Nara, yourselves and small companies like ours.
We lost him.
He'll come back.
And maybe larger companies like
Rajiv, we lost you. If you can just
Recap.
Last
Recap.
10 seconds, just last 10 seconds. Yeah. Okay, while we
Can you
wait.
hear me? Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Am
yeah.
I audible? Yeah, sorry. So I think I just kind of said that two things. One is that yes, we need to definitely get over this stigma, try and make this sector more sexy. And the second one is basically go to the government and create a much larger entity out of this, and not just talk amongst ourselves. Yes, we're a very small community, but I think we need to involve government to create a mega-sized picture out of this and make it into an ecosystem really. So that's what I think very strongly about. I think standards and legislation lack drastically. I mean, when you say put up a toilet, there's no guarantee to what kind of toilet you need. So there needs to be a standard for toilets, size for toilets. So let's create that. I mean, we've done that over a period of time, but let's put it down into a document, take it to government so that even the municipalities, the urban local bodies, the PWDs, they all speak the same language.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. Yes.
Can I comment? I mean, I agree perfectly with what Mr. Rajiv said. Banks don't look at sanitation as an activity, as an income generating activity. So it's the bias against the activity is very, very there. Also the people are not very attuned to using sanitation as an income generating activity. For example, sometime back there was a scheme to link toilets with biogas plants. But in many rural households, though the gas was being generated, it was very easy to cook on the gas, but then those households were not using the gas to cook. So the reserve mentality that Rajiv pointed out it comes into play over there. It's very, very true. So it's only public education that's needed to generate finance. I feel that some agency can come out with social impact bonds. So this is an area where we can generate funding for the activity. Maybe some NGO can take up this, and SEBI has now come out with guidelines for social impact bonds. Maybe this is an area where public financing can come into this area.
I don't know whether you're aware, Mr. Jagirdar, but with NABARD last year, we had announced this. Your chairman had announced this at our at the Blended Finance conference. So this is clearly a space that we are working in very aggressively. And I hopefully before the end of this year, we will be able to launch the first of these bonds in sanitation. It's never been done before. So we're trying to do that. But yeah, it's a really good avenue. Blending both grant as well as finance, debt. Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
I think one more quick point from my side is also, I think I missed upon it. I wrote it in my message that, I think corporate guarantors, if they can come forward by way of CSR, to offer corporate guarantees instead of giving in the money in reality, that could be also a great way to generate funding. Just a thought.
So that is actually one of the ways in which these social impact bonds are being created. In fact, maybe we can touch base offline, and I can, showcase to you some of the stuff that we're working with with Grameen on. Very exciting, and actually answering the issues of startups. So for example, you don't create impact bonds that are for 50 crores and 100 crores, which are too difficult to fund. But look at them in bite-sized pieces, say 2 crores, 3 crores, which actually help the SME or the MSME to put up a plant or to utilize those for either fixed assets or for O&M. So, very interesting things. But again, we need to be pushing very hard, and a lot more people need to get involved in this, if we have to meet these numbers. Yeah.
Anandita, do you want to comment on this? Anything that you want to say?
I just, through CSRs, etc. I think that's an excellent idea. But also, like, Rajiv did say that during the Swachh Bharat mission, there was that conversation which happened, like he said, shit around the table, on the dining table. I thought that was excellent. But also, I think with that needs to be that habit changing, right? That's another really important part. That it, like he said, why aren't they using the habit? Is that conversation still there? So why isn't the habit building? And that is where another, like a action point is that what can we do as a economy to have that habit changing? Can we create, can we create solutions? Soumya said that, let's move away from, say, low-cost solutions. But the idea is also, it's not just about low cost, but what are the solutions that they will actually want to use, say sanitation toilets or hand washing facilities, because till now they don't believe that there is a need for this. They believe that the systems, the practices that they were doing are the best. And, I think there is that conversation also needs to be kind of put on the table, that why, it's even though they have received money from the government, even though they have received money from the CSR, they've received support from CSR. Why aren't they using those toilets? There is still a problem of open defecation. Why is that there? So I think that is kind of also another habit changing, and as a panel, I think call to action, like you said, and then moving forward, action points. How can we work to create that, together, to not just educate, but also provide them solutions, provide them resources which will actually want them to use the structures that they've created, what they have been supported for. So I think that's another point I just wanted to add in this conversation.
Thank you. Natasha, you want to say anything?
No, I'm fine. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you
so I thought one more point that came up both through Rajiv and Anandita was skilling. And right now, I mean, when we are looking at the next, and the point that Naina raised in the fireside chat was about what next in skilling. So we saw that tech, automation, robotics has made an entry into the whole space of sanitation. And in fact, the pandemic actually put a lot of pressure on no human interface and all those things. And in fact, Rajiv was telling me more about this. And several frontline women workers need to be upskilled to really get this whole tech bit into, get them into that as well. So Anandita, you also mentioned about how, your training through phones really did not work because of access of internet and other things. So tech plays such an important role in the way forward that how I think it's important to discuss how this is going to be really addressed and this challenge is going to be looked at. I think that was one piece that was left in this whole, looking forward post-pandemic and livelihoods bit. So Anandita, you want to come in, or Rajiv, and then I can get Chekala ma'am and Jahangir Das.
I just want to jump in. So, I think one of the points which I did mention was that we've definitely seen a boost in people using technology. What I mean by that is that before the pandemic, we had people who, only about 30% of our audience was available on digital. We have now seen a 20% jump. So there is that jump, and they are looking towards, say, YouTube to kind of reskill or upskill themselves. So I think there is that, there is that need, and there is that drive to do better. So I think with what Rajiv had said that, let's go with that blueprint. I think that can be a part of this conversation, that, what can we provide them in just terms of like really basic, like phones. We can, use phones. And again, it doesn't only have to be smartphones. It can be simple phones. There are lots of other ways. So I think that is a part of the blueprint, and that is where this will move forward. We did see digital becoming like you said, non-human interface becoming a part of a huge part of the skill training, a huge part of even connecting them to, say, microfinance or providing them with business ideas, etc. But yes, I think this is the way forward, and we will have to, in that blueprint of the Sanipreneurs, as he has put it, we will have to have that discussion, and that will need to be a part of the conversation.
Rajiv, you want to come?
I think to just put it very simply, all this technology and smart and whatever words that have come up over the last couple of years, and we want to blend it into sanitation also. What is it really doing? Basically, it's the ease of doing business. It is the fluency in getting work done and collecting data. Now, we are not trying to reduce the number of people. We're just trying to make somebody's task simpler. We did not know. I didn't know. I mean, I'm not amongst the young generation, where they understand the language of iPhones and whatever. I'm a slightly older than that, and for me to really adapt to all this technology does get a little difficult, even for me. So I can imagine what happens to people who are, let's say, uneducated, who are on the field. It's not easy. So what we did was that we tried to develop something, and I'm not an IT person. I love to say I'm an SHIT person, but we've developed a mechanism where we are now 100% cloud company, and we're working on an SAP. So even an SAP today has come down to a level of making even a service technician, a driver operator, a supervisor understand and simply put into a mobile phone using symbols and pictures on what work needs. And I think the way to go forward here is that use technology to make your work simpler, but get more people involved and create enterprises rather than reduce. It's not possible to reduce people. I mean, you can reduce people at the administrative level, but at the brick and mortar level, at the service execution level, you can't reduce people. You need to have some serious robots today to actually do it. Robotics is right now only maybe limited to drains. But honestly speaking, right now, we still have a lot of time for that. I think we're far away from that. So let's talk brass tacks and the real. Reality that needs to be provided.
I think we lost you for the last 10 seconds.
No, I just said that I think the reality is that we need to come down to brass tacks and use technology to make this simpler. And then let's take the next step as robotics and whatever it is, right? But right now, I think in this space, we're too early for that. I don't want to say that it's not good or anything. It's just that right now, let's talk about basic things to be done first. Let everything else sort of come hand in hand. But first and foremost, like we decided that, okay, let's talk about the reality of the picture of bringing in funding, finance, blended finance, creating an ecosystem, scaling. I think that's more important.
Jagirdas sir, you want to comment?
The task is humongous, so I would like to tackle it from the convergence angle. So it's unless all the agencies that are involved in this task come together, it's just not possible. NABARD is working with over 100 corporates for various activities, so be it tribal development, be it watershed, climate change, skilling, GI tagging, so many activities. So through FICCI and through DICCI, we'd like to involve all the partners. We are open to the idea of funding initiatives that other corporates take up. Plus, we have got our own CSR wing, NAB Foundation. So those corporates that are not having their own interventions can definitely work with NAB Foundation and take things forward.
Chekala ma'am, you want to say something?
Yeah, I really agree.
Actually, we cannot ignore the role of tech in awareness as well. So, in government is used, like one of our respondents here is also pointing out the same thing, that the role of tech is not limited to mechanization, but also awareness, and that's been huge. So, Chakala ma'am, over to you on your response.
Yeah, I really agree with Jagidar ji, because see, in sanitation, there is a huge work, huge task. And also we have a huge force also, huge human resource also. Only thing is that we have to bridge the gap between the task and resources. And for that, I agree with Natasha ji also, कि we should have a more NGOs for that, more corporates, they should come forward. Government is doing its role. Government's role is to make policy, rules, like that. That is already there. But then at the ground level, we need the human resource to work and implement the projects. Also, I think if there is no dearth of funds, even government funds are, I think they are not being spent within the time limit also. The reason is that we don't have a skilled force, human resource, and also the implementing skill. We cannot say that urban local bodies or rural local bodies, they are unable to implement that, because Swachh Bharat Mission has already clear that there should be a community participation, then there are corporates participation, like that. So total implementation is not the responsibility of the ULB. All these agencies should come forward to complete all these works. And only I think sanitation workers should not be limited to this. So many work is there. It is pending. Just Jagedar saying they are giving so much funding for the various activities. But I think one of the activity actually we were taken up, that was for the reuse of the processed water for the farmers. But that project could not also be completed because of the social impact and also the behavior and mindset of the farmers. They were just taking the water from the nala and like that, but they didn't want to pay for the recycle and process water. So these should we should change that. And this should be done by the, I think, NGOs. Social impact is also very necessary. And all we have, all are we talking about the dignity to be given to the sanitation field. If it is not given, I don't think it will be so many years will go, but then we will not be able to complete the work, because funds are there in a Manarega, but then we are not, funds are, they are just unspent. Why? Because in Manarega, people should come forward, household should come forward to work. But then those Shoj Khaddes, people are not ready to construct that. And in Manarega, ki bahar ke log aake nahi kar sakte. So if there is no dignity, that's why people from the villages or urban cities, they are not coming to forward to construct the Shosh Khadda or the sanitation facilities. So even though facilities are there, we are talking about the sanitation economy and we are giving the program to the for the people. But then because of the they don't have any dignity in that construction activity, like the Shosh Khadda, like that, but they will try to build the house. But then sanitation activity don't. So I think the first thing is to give samman to this, and that will happen to the social impact only. And here I think it is the spare of the NGOs. They will change the mindset of the community, because in the pandemic we have observed that when we have followed the honoring our frontline workers, sanitation workers, so they were also motivated to work so much, and they were tirelessly working during the pandemic. Why? Because they were motivated by this honor given to them. But then we should continue that, giving the honor to them. So it is not just a one thing or one time. It should be built up in our social activity and social culture. Then only I think we will move forward. And also I think as I was in a government, and also after retiring in 2019, I'm working for the All India Institute of Local Self-Government, and also now in a Maharashtra Urban Watch Secretariat. It is really important to have the human resource capacity utilized to the fullest. And that is also a responsibility of the corporate sector, each and every, because corporate sector, they are required human resources. Government programs are there, skilling, we are using skilling, reskilling, upskilling, all these are there. But I don't think there are any institutions who are planning for the this training and capacity building for the skilling, reskilling, and upskilling. And I think in this skilling, reskilling, and upskilling, we should also attach the what I will say, motivational theory of a Maslow's. Of course, sanitation worker will definitely motivate because of the skilling and the reskilling and upskilling, because this will be just like a ladder for them to go forward. And this will also what I will say, we are saying sanitation economy. So we should think on that. Policy is already there, but then I think uh, expert NGOs, they should come together, and I think if they will come together, it will be the role of the ISC also. At our level, Maharashtra Urban Watch Secretary, we are thinking on that line. At least for the Maharashtra, we are thinking we will register all the NGOs who are aspiring to work in this, and also those who are wanted our help. So we are just trying through our watch secretary to bridge the gap, and that is what needed. So many NGOs are there, but so far as NGOs are concerned, they themselves have to skill and reskill them, I will say, because sanitation is a specialized field. So so I think that should we do. So much work is there. And first thing is that to my heart, it is that we are saying we don't have much number in sanitation, but we do have so much number, but as they are unorganized and we don't have a number of them. So if we collect the number, organize them through any systems, actually government has already given orders to identify them even at the rag pickers and give them the identity cards, but that is also not happening. So I think that is the work of the NGO, to go and to collect and organize them. If they are organized, then only we can plan a training program for them, and also all other programs, what we are thinking of a social security and financial security. And if they will be skilled and organized, then only they will understand the impact. You see, we are organized and we are responsible for certain things. So some responsibility should be there through organizing them. This is my view.
Thank you, Chekala ma'am. We are completely run out of time, but I think it was a really amazing discussion. And thank you all the panelists, Chekala ma'am, Anandita, Jahagirda sir, Rajiv, everyone for being here. And I think many takeaway points, I think Natasha will definitely bring them in. But I think, yeah, that blueprint should definitely be made, and everyone coming together is the way ahead. So over to you, Natasha.
Yeah, so just very quickly to summarize, we've got, I think we've had a great discussion. I think a lot of these points all of us already know, so I'm not going to belabor them. But just to share with you, this morning when I woke up, I was very excited. This is an area where I'm very very passionate about. How do we actually get women to the forefront, and specifically in a place like WASH. And, one of the first things I saw was a WhatsApp message from a friend who is working in Ahmedabad. 2 workers in Bhopal, sanitation workers died. And, that kind of brings home the reality of India's progress. 75 years and we've achieved so much. We're, I mean, amazing nation. I don't think there's any economy in the world that has been able to achieve in such a short time span what we've achieved. I think SPM1 showed us that, that when Indians put their mind to something, they can actually achieve wonders. But we still haven't been able to get this one basic need right, which is our own, our own health and our own cleanliness. And, we lay it down to poverty, we lay it down to wrong policies. All these are true, absolutely 100% true. But what is stopping us as a people, as a civil society, what is stopping us from actually pushing these, these breakthroughs that we see, which are like bubbles of, happiness that are coming up, like Saraplast and Sato and others. These are bubbles. Why can't we create more and more of these bubbles? Or why can't we work with the government, towards making a clean India a reality by 2030? I think that's the big question that all of us should be asking. We should be asking more and more of it, in all the forums in which we participate. And frankly, I think we at ISC, we will continue to ask this question, going forward as well. So even though this year we've said gender is our, is our main theme, we are going to take gender as the theme through the lens through which we will view all the work that we do, even in the years to come. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, everyone, and really enjoyed your conversations. Your ideas are fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you. That was a great discussion. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Saili. One second. Just give me a moment. Just give me a moment. Asawari, stay back. Okay, just give me a moment, please. Yeah. Hi, Saidi. I had to physically remove people because they were just not
Natasha, was it fine? I was not sure.
so good.
Can't hear you, Natasha.
And you're on mute.
Haan.
Wait, no. You cannot hear you. Cannot hear you. Cannot hear you,
No.
ma'am. Cannot hear you. No. One second.
Okay. Now can you hear me?
Ah.
Yeah. Okay. No, it was very good, Saili. I think, you know.
Thank you. Only
when
that
it's-
question, I think you came in really at the right time. But I was like, oh, did I get it wrong or something?
No,
So I asked
perfectly
Chaitali.
right. I just wanted to ask it because, you know, Saili,
No, it's important.